I know why they shouldn't be married. I'm speaking now so I won't have to forever hold my peace. Why did she have to marry him for anyway?
Because I love him.
I thought she loved me.
I do, Opie.
Don't catch me marrying somebody else.
We finally know why Andy Griffith was buried just 4 hours after he passed away. And the truth behind this moment is still shocking many fans today. Andy Griffith was a beloved actor, known for his warm smile and calm presence, but his final goodbye happened much faster than most people expected. Why was everything done so quickly? And what really happened behind the scenes on that day? Was it family choice, tradition, or something deeper no one talked about? Join us as we uncover the full story behind this emotional moment. The role that changed Andy Griffith forever. In 1955, Andy Griffith stepped onto the stage in the hit production No Time for Sergeants. He played Will Stockdale, a simple and innocent Georgia farm boy who was drafted into the Air Force. The character confused his superiors with his honesty and natural innocence, but audiences instantly loved him. His performance felt real, warm, and deeply human. Viewers connected with him immediately, and critics praised him everywhere the show appeared. The success of the stage production quickly pushed Andy Griffith into the national spotlight. Hollywood executives, who had been carefully watching him from a distance, suddenly became very interested. They saw a performer with charm, natural timing, and a unique screen presence that audiences trusted almost immediately. The success of the play opened new doors for him, and in 1957, the story was adapted into a film version. Once again, Andy Griffith impressed audiences with his performance, but only 1 year later, everything changed. In 1958, legendary director Elia Kazan cast Andy Griffith in A Face in the Crowd. The role could not have been more different from Will Stockdale. Instead of playing a harmless and lovable innocent, Andy Griffith became Lonesome Rhodes, a manipulative drifter who used charm and friendliness to gain the trust of ordinary people. Behind closed doors, however, the character secretly looked down on the same public that adored him. The performance shocked audiences and critics alike. Many people had only seen Andy Griffith as a gentle country figure filled with warmth and humor. In this film, he revealed something completely different. His acting was dark, sharp, layered, and powerful. Every scene carried tension. Every smile from the character hid something dangerous underneath. Critics praised the performance as one of the strongest film debuts of its time. With a single movie, Andy Griffith proved that he was capable of far more than simple comedy or friendly rural characters. He showed that he could handle emotionally complicated material with incredible skill. Hollywood suddenly saw another side of him, one filled with intensity and depth. But there was a problem. The public preferred the warm version of Andy Griffith. Audiences loved the innocence they had first seen in No Time for Sergeants. They felt comfortable with his humor, kindness, and simplicity. Even though his darker performance earned enormous respect, Hollywood struggled to understand how to use that side of him. The industry saw the talent, but the market wanted comfort and familiarity instead. That moment quietly shaped the rest of his career. In 1960, television producer Sheldon Leonard approached Andy Griffith with an idea for a television series centered around a small-town sheriff in the fictional town of Mayberry, North Carolina. The role seemed simple on the surface, but the decision carried enormous weight for Andy Griffith, personally and professionally. He accepted the role. That decision would define his image for the rest of his life. What Andy Griffith chose in 1960 was not simply another acting job. It became a trade between artistic complexity and public affection. At the time, the choice likely seemed wise. Television was growing rapidly, and the role offered stability, popularity, and connection with audiences. But the long-term cost of that decision would only become clear years later. The Andy Griffith Show premiered on October 3, 1960. From the very beginning, the series connected with audiences in a way that almost nobody expected. Network executives were surprised by how deeply viewers embraced the show. Ratings models had not predicted such overwhelming success. Industry experts could not fully explain it. America did not simply enjoy Mayberry. America emotionally depended on it. The timing of the show mattered enormously. The nation was living through a period of uncertainty and change. The Cold War created constant fear beneath daily life. The civil rights movement was challenging long-standing social beliefs across the South and the rest of the country. Younger Americans were energized by new political ideas, while older generations often felt unsettled by how quickly society was changing. During all of this tension, Mayberry offered peace. The town felt calm, safe, and steady. Problems were solved without violence or bitterness. Life moved slowly. Conversations mattered. Relationships mattered. People treated one another with patience and understanding. Sheriff Andy Taylor became the center of that world. Unlike many television heroes of the era, Sheriff Taylor did not rely on force or aggression. He rarely carried a gun. He solved conflicts through calm conversations, wisdom, and understanding. He raised his son Opie with tenderness and care, something audiences rarely saw from fathers on television during that period. He was gentle without appearing weak, funny without cruelty, and wise without arrogance. To millions of viewers, Sheriff Andy Taylor represented the best version of America itself. The series dominated television for 8 seasons. It became one of the most beloved shows in American television history. During its final season, the show finished #1 in the Nielsen ratings, an achievement extremely rare for a long-running series. The program also created one of television's most successful spin-offs, Gomer Pyle. The show influenced television culture for decades. It launched careers, shaped public memories, and became deeply connected to American identity. Even years later, the sound of the show's famous whistled theme could still bring strong emotions to longtime viewers. Yet, while audiences found comfort inside Mayberry, Andy Griffith himself was experiencing something far more complicated behind the scenes. The gap between the real man and the character the public worshipped continued growing larger every year. Fans no longer separated Andy Griffith from Sheriff Andy Taylor. Many people truly believed they were the same person. Strangers approached him in stores, restaurants, and public places, calling him Sheriff with deep admiration. To audiences, he represented kindness, patience, wisdom, and emotional safety. But people who worked closely with him saw a much more complicated individual. Those around Andy Griffith often described him as a man filled with contradictions. At times, he could be incredibly generous, warm, and supportive. In other moments, he could become distant, impatient, and emotionally cold. His personality shifted between kindness and frustration in ways that surprised many people around him. Private struggles behind fame and success. The first marriage of Andy Griffith to his college sweetheart, Barbara Bray Edwards, ended in 1972 after 20 years together. People close to them believed that fame had slowly placed a heavy strain on their relationship. The constant public attention, the long periods apart, and the pressure of living under the eyes of millions quietly damaged the foundation of their marriage over time. Andy Griffith was loved across America, but being admired by the public while still trying to maintain a normal private life became increasingly difficult. Their son, Andy Griffith Jr., who was known as Sam, carried emotional pain from the separation for many years. Their adopted daughter, Dixie Griffith, rarely spoke publicly about that period of their lives. When she did mention those years, her words were always careful and limited, showing how deeply personal and painful that chapter remained for the family. In 1973, Andy Griffith married actress Solika Kasuto. However, the marriage lasted only 6 years before ending quietly as well. After 2 failed marriages, Griffith increasingly felt that the image people saw on television was very different from the reality of his personal life. The cheerful and comforting figure audiences adored did not fully match the complicated man behind the cameras. Over time, he became convinced that public fame and private happiness could not easily exist together. In 1968, Andy Griffith made a decision that shocked the entertainment industry. He left The Andy Griffith Show while the series was still at the height of its popularity. Many television stars hold tightly to success for as long as possible, but Griffith chose to walk away. He explained that he was exhausted and creatively restless. He also wanted to prove that he could do more than play the beloved Sheriff Andy Taylor in Mayberry. The years that followed became one of the most difficult professional periods of his career. In 1969, he tried returning to dramatic film work with Angel in My Pocket, but the movie failed to create much excitement. He appeared in musical specials and television movies, yet none of these projects captured the same public attention he once enjoyed. Earlier in his career, critics had praised his darker and more complex performance in A Face in the Crowd, but by the 1970s, many people seemed to remember him only as the gentle sheriff from Mayberry. Audiences wanted comfort and familiarity from Andy Griffith. They wanted him connected forever to the small-town warmth of The Andy Griffith Show. Griffith resisted this expectation because he hoped to explore different creative paths. But that resistance came with a cost. By the middle of the 1970s, he found himself in a difficult position. He was still respected as a performer and deeply loved by audiences, yet he was no longer considered an important force in television or film. He moved from one project to another without finding a major success, experiencing the loneliness of a man who had once been everywhere in popular culture and now seemed forgotten by much of the industry. Everything changed again in 1986 with the arrival of Matlock. Griffith played Benjamin Matlock, a smart and experienced defense attorney from Atlanta. The character carried many of the qualities audiences had always loved in him. He still had warmth, humor, and a calm Southern style that made viewers feel comfortable. However, Matlock also gave Griffith the opportunity to show a sharper and more complicated side of his acting abilities. Unlike Sheriff Taylor, Benjamin Matlock could be calculating and strategic inside the courtroom. He sometimes manipulated situations to uncover the truth, adding layers of complexity that Griffith had rarely been allowed to show before. The character balanced intelligence, charm, and moral uncertainty in a way that audiences found compelling. The series lasted for 9 successful seasons and made Andy Griffith a major television star once again. More importantly, the success of Matlock gave him a stronger sense of creative control than he had experienced during his earlier television fame. Even while his career recovered, serious personal struggles continued behind the scenes. In 1983, Andy Griffith was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological condition in which the body's immune system attacks the peripheral nervous system. The illness caused severe paralysis that became progressively worse. For a period of time, he completely lost the ability to walk. The experience was devastating. Griffith had spent his life performing in front of audiences, commanding attention through his voice, movement, and presence. Suddenly, he found himself unable to control his own body. The fear and uncertainty went far beyond physical suffering. He rarely spoke publicly about the illness, but whenever he did, the emotional weight of the experience was clear. His recovery was slow and painful. Although he eventually regained movement, the illness left lasting effects on his body and on the way he viewed life. The experience forced him to confront his own vulnerability and mortality in a way he never had before. People who worked with him during the later years of Matlock noticed changes in him. He moved more carefully and carried himself more cautiously, as though he no longer fully trusted his physical strength. During this period, Andy Griffith also began speaking more openly in private about his growing desire for invisibility. He was not talking about disappearing because of failure. He had already experienced professional disappointment during the 1970s and strongly disliked it. Instead, he longed for the freedom to live quietly and privately after spending more than 30 years giving the public nearly everything it wanted from him. He had seen how famous people were treated near the end of their lives. Public illness, media attention outside hospitals, endless television coverage, and highly publicized memorials deeply disturbed him. He disliked the way private grief often became public entertainment. To him, it seemed that celebrities could lose control of their own humanity even in death, becoming part of a spectacle they had spent their lives trying to escape. Andy Griffith wanted no part of that kind of attention. After decades of fame, success, pressure, and personal struggle, what he desired most was something simple and rare for a man of his celebrity. He wanted peace, privacy, and the ability to quietly step away from the public world that had shaped so much of his life. The private goodbye that shocked fans. In conversations with his wife, Cindy Knight, whom he married in 1983, Andy Griffith made his final wishes very clear. Cindy became the most calming and steady presence in his adult life, and Andy trusted her completely. He did not speak about death in a distant or uncertain way. Instead, he carefully explained exactly what he wanted when his time came. Andy wanted everything to remain private. He did not want a public event, a large ceremony, or a media spectacle. He wanted his passing to happen quietly and peacefully on Roanoke Island, where he had lived for many years in a home far away from Hollywood attention. The island, with its salt air and peaceful coastline, gave him the calm life he preferred during his later years. Most importantly, Andy wanted everything completed before the outside world could turn it into public entertainment. For a man who valued privacy deeply, these wishes were understandable. What surprised many people later was how completely and successfully his family carried them out. On the morning of July 3, 2012, Andy Griffith woke for the final time at his home on Roanoke Island. His health had been declining for a long period. His heart had grown weaker over the years, especially after the lasting effects of his earlier battle with Guillain-Barré syndrome. The people closest to him already understood that the end was near. There were no dramatic final moments. There was no public farewell. Andy passed away quietly at home at the age of 86, with Cindy beside him in the place he loved most. What happened afterward had already been carefully planned. At the time of Andy Griffith's death, North Carolina law allowed burial on private property under certain legal conditions. The process required permits, but the permits could be approved very quickly when necessary. Andy's family worked closely with local officials who understood both the law and the sensitive nature of the situation. Within 5 hours of his death, Andy Griffith was buried on the grounds of his Roanoke Island property. No public statement had been released before the burial. No television network or newspaper had been informed in advance. By the time the news reached the public, everything was already complete. Reporters quickly traveled to Roanoke Island hoping to cover the event, but there was nothing left to photograph or film. The private goodbye Andy wanted had already happened exactly as planned. The reaction from the public was strong and divided. Many fans felt heartbroken. They believed they had lost the chance to say goodbye to someone they had welcomed into their homes for decades through television. Newspapers received countless letters, and online discussions filled with cynicism and confusion. Some people questioned how such a beloved public figure could be buried so quickly and privately. Others understood the decision immediately. They saw the burial as the final expression of a man who always separated his public image from his real life. Sheriff Andy Taylor belonged to the world of Mayberry, but Andy Griffith himself belonged only to his family and to the life he chose away from fame. The private burial was not a rushed legal trick. The North Carolina law allowing private property burials existed for families who wanted to bury loved ones without public attention or outside involvement. Andy's wishes had been researched, documented, and prepared carefully long before his death. Ron Howard, who played Opie Taylor and remained close to Andy throughout his life, spoke quietly about the burial afterward. He understood the decision completely and said that Andy had always done things his own way. Don Knotts had passed away in 2006, years before these events. Friends who knew both men believed Knotts would have understood and respected Andy's final choice. After Andy's death, Cindy Knight Griffith avoided public attention and continued protecting the privacy her husband valued for decades. His grave on Roanoke Island remains private. There is no public memorial or tourist site marking the location. Only the quiet island, the ocean air, and the peaceful shoreline remain, holding the privacy Andy Griffith protected until the very end. Privacy and the life beyond Mayberry. If people are mourning Sheriff Andy Taylor, the calm and caring man with the fishing pole, the gentle smile, and the quiet wisdom that made Mayberry feel real, then that sadness is understandable. That character was created through the love of the public. It survived because audiences stayed loyal through 8 seasons of television and many decades of reruns. Over time, Mayberry became more than just a fictional town. It became part of American culture, a comforting place that people returned to during difficult and uncertain years. Sheriff Andy Taylor no longer belonged to only one actor. He became something shared by millions of people who found peace, warmth, and safety in that world. Because of that connection, many people believed that Andy Griffith owed the public a final goodbye. They felt that a man who had received so much love from audiences deserved to leave with a public farewell equal to that love. To many viewers, it seemed only natural that there should have been a large goodbye, a moment of recognition, and a final public appearance that matched the enormous impact he had on television history. But there was another side to Andy Griffith. There was Andy Samuel Griffith, the boy from Mount Airy who grew up without running water. There was the young man who discovered his voice while singing in a church choir. There was the actor who once shocked audiences with the darkness and intensity of his performance in A Face in the Crowd, before Hollywood decided it preferred him as a symbol of comfort and warmth instead. When people look at his burial through the life of that man rather than the television character, the decision begins to make deep and painful sense. Andy Griffith had spent decades giving parts of himself away. Since the beginning of The Andy Griffith Show in 1960, his career had become a careful balance between his real identity and the version of himself the public wanted to see. Every season of the show required him to continue carrying the image people loved. Every meeting with fans became another moment where audiences hoped to see Mayberry and Sheriff Andy Taylor instead of the private man standing in front of them. Later, during the years of Matlock, the same struggle continued in a different form. He constantly worked to balance public expectations with the limits of what he still had emotionally and personally to give. Behind the success and recognition, there were pressures that never disappeared. There were marriages that suffered under the weight of fame. There were illnesses that slowly weakened his physical confidence. There were difficult years during the 1970s when his professional career lost momentum and uncertainty surrounded his future. As the years passed, all of those experiences added up. Fame brought success, but it also slowly turned him into a public symbol. The longer he lived in the spotlight, the more difficult it became to simply exist as a normal person. More than anything else, Andy Griffith wanted privacy. He was not trying to hide from the world in bitterness or anger. He was not trying to become isolated from other people. He simply wanted the freedom to live quietly. He wanted to walk to his mailbox without attracting headlines. He wanted to sit on his porch without becoming a tourist attraction. He wanted to spend time in his own home without feeling like he was always being watched. Most importantly, he wanted the right to die peacefully in his own bed without his final moments becoming public entertainment. After spending 50 years earning admiration one performance at a time, he believed he had earned that privacy. What Andy Griffith left behind was more than a television legacy. He also left behind an important lesson about the difference between the life people perform for others and the life that truly belongs to them. Many famous people eventually lose the line between those two worlds. Their public image becomes so powerful that it completely replaces their private identity. Andy Griffith spent much of his adult life fighting against that possibility. Sometimes the strongest decision a person can make is refusing to allow public expectations to fully take control of who they are. That refusal became one of the deepest truths of Andy Griffith's life. The real meaning behind the final 5 hours of his story was not simply about funeral arrangements, legal decisions, or shocking headlines. Beneath all of that was the story of a man who had spent decades watching fame consume the people around him. Over time, he saw how easily public identity could erase the private self. He watched fellow actors and celebrities lose themselves completely inside the characters and images the world expected them to maintain. In many cases, their real identities disappeared beneath the performances. By the end of their lives, even their funerals no longer felt personal. Everything became part of the show. Andy Griffith saw grief turned into entertainment. He saw funerals become public spectacles. He watched the entertainment industry transform the deaths of famous people into major television events and news programming opportunities. For a short period, the media would focus intensely on the loss, filling television screens and headlines with emotional coverage. Then, within a couple of days, attention would move somewhere else. No matter how loudly the world had mourned, he did not want his own death to become part of that cycle. His decision was not sudden or emotional. It was not the fearful reaction of a man desperate to escape attention at the end of his life. Instead, it was the final result of beliefs he had been quietly developing for many years. He understood something that fame often destroys in people: the difference between what a person does and who that person truly is. What Andy Griffith did was perform. He entertained audiences with extraordinary skill for decades. He created characters that people loved deeply and remembered for generations. He succeeded in television, film, and entertainment because he understood how to connect with viewers in a sincere and human way. But performing was not the entirety of who he was. Andy Griffith's quiet legacy and final piece, 8 seasons of Mayberry and 9 seasons of Matlock, made Andy Griffith one of the most respected faces in television history. His career also stretched far beyond acting. It began with a comedy monologue about football and later grew into a music career filled with gospel albums that connected deeply with listeners. Those records sold quietly, but steadily, because people found comfort and sincerity in his voice. It was something honest and personal that had little to do with fame or television success. Behind the success was a man shaped by simple beginnings. Andy Griffith was the boy from Mount Airy, North Carolina, the son of a carpenter and a singer in a church choir. He was a young man who stepped onto a Broadway stage carrying only his voice, his story, and a strong belief that he belonged there. Over the years, he built a career marked by consistency, talent, and quality that the entertainment industry respected for for decades. His personal life, however, was far more complicated than the warm characters audiences saw on screen. He experienced 2 failed marriages before finally finding lasting happiness with Cindy Knight. Their relationship became the steady partnership he had long searched for. As a father, his connection with his children carried challenges and emotional distance. There was always the difficult reality of a man who could appear comforting and present to millions on television while struggling to create that same closeness in private life. The real Andy Griffith was not the perfect image people connected with through Mayberry. He was human, flawed, private, and deeply complicated. Because of that, he deserved a farewell that reflected his real life instead of the image television created around him. He did not want a large public memorial or a grand televised goodbye. There was no desire for celebrity tributes, dramatic speeches, or emotional television specials filled with archive footage and familiar music. Instead, his life ended quietly on Roanoke Island in North Carolina, surrounded by the peaceful setting he loved and by the woman who stood beside him during his final years. His grave remains unmarked to the public. There is no visible plaque from any public road and no official directions pointing visitors toward his burial place. Roanoke Island does not present itself as the resting place of a television legend because Andy Griffith never wanted it to. The island simply remains what it has always been: calm, ancient, and untouched by the noise of fame. In that quietness, he finally found the peace he spent much of his life searching for. Mount Airy, the town that inspired Mayberry, remembers him differently. The barber shop that inspired Floyd's shop, the courthouse that resembles the one viewers saw on television, and the streets filled with local pride continue to keep his memory alive. The town honors him without spectacle. Its remembrance is steady, permanent, and sincere. There is a statue celebrating his life. There are annual Mayberry Days events that continue bringing people together. Walking through the town still carries the feeling that something meaningful began there. A real boy once walked those sidewalks and carried the spirit of that place into every role he played. No matter how much time passes, Andy Griffith and Mount Airy remain forever connected. That connection reveals the deepest truth about his life. He wanted privacy and spent his later years protecting it carefully. Yet the work he created made complete privacy impossible. The warmth of Mayberry, the wisdom of Matlock, and the comfort found in his gospel music touched too many lives to ever disappear quietly. Even after death, his presence remains everywhere. It lives in television reruns on quiet afternoons, in memories passed from parents to children, and in the familiar theme song that still brings comfort to people during difficult moments. His work became part of everyday life for generations. What do you think about Andy Griffith? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Before you go, be sure to click on the video shown on your screen.